in this video, I'm going to show you how you can set up business rules in ProcessMaker. So the way that I'm going to show you is doing it through a connection to collections, which are data tables in ProcessMaker, and I'll explain that in a minute. You could also do it through scripts. That might be a more straightforward method depending on whether or not you want to give a business user the ability to edit the business rules. I'm going to show it through records in a collection because that way you can just link business user to the collection and they'll be able to edit any business rules in a more user-friendly way than if you had to have a business user make a developer edit a script instead. All right, so first of all, before I explain how business rules work in this particular example, I'm going to start with collections. So collections are data tables in ProcessMaker. So I have a collection called business rule settings, which is a data table of the business rules I need for a certain process in ProcessMaker. So if I go to this right menu and I click on records, each record is going to correspond to a business rule I have set up for this particular process. So the business rules in this example are based on 4 criteria: the type of request it is, the production type, source data, and audience category. For example, during a request, when an end user is filling out a form, they're going to fill in the type, production type, source data, and audience category. Then we're going to use an internal endpoint to query the record that corresponds to that business rule, and then it's going to return a set of documents and a set of assignment rules based on these 4 criteria. So if I were to view the record, for example, we can see here in this record that if the type is fundraising, the source data is ad hoc, the production type is updated, and the audience category is domestic, then we're going to require this set of documents and this set of tasks. So this is just a little bit more user-friendly for a business user to edit these business rules because you can just link them to the collection, and if they needed to change the outcome of that business rule, they would just be able to edit it directly through this form instead. So then here, if they wanted to change what happens based on these settings or change the settings themselves, they can do that here. So then here is the process map that actually utilizes those business rules. So what happens in the flow of this process is that someone is going to fill in a request, and they're going to fill in those 4 settings that we saw earlier. And then based on the 4 settings, we're going to use a data connector to connect to that internal endpoint and then find the set of documents and the assignment rules based on those particular settings entered by the end user here. So a data connector within ProcessMaker is just a more user-friendly way to connect to an endpoint. So every time you create a new collection in ProcessMaker, that automatically generates a set of endpoints, so you don't need to, go and create a new data connector for every endpoint. So if I were to search for those endpoint settings, so that is going to be for the get method. So here we have this set of data connectors that correspond to those settings. So here it is, the get documents by settings. And then here we added those settings as query parameters at the end of the URL here. So here we're able to add query parameters based on request data here. So we're adding those variable values using mustache syntax here. And then so when you run a request, the person's going to enter those settings. It's going to call that endpoint. And then it's going, in this next task, it would give us the set of documents that they would need to upload. And then what's going to happen is each of these tasks is going to be assigned based on the settings in the collection record that correspond to what the user selects in the form. So here I'll just run the beginning of a sample request. So this is a web entry, and I'm going to copy and paste this URL here. So then here I could have a summary. I'm just going to write request 1, description request test. And then here we're selecting the type. So this corresponds to those settings here, right? So type, I could say, is fundraising. Then it's going to show these other fields such as the production type, source data, ad hoc, and the audience category. So here we have domestic. So again, those 4 fields correspond to these settings here in a collection record. And then I'm going to submit the form. So then what happens at this point is we're using that data connector to query the collection for the correct record with the settings that we want. So then down here, this has automatically listed the documents that are required based on the business rules in that collection. So this part where we have section 2 and these 2 document uploads, this is dynamic based on the values entered here above in these 4 fields. And that's just one way to execute business rules within ProcessMaker.